Because as a 23-year-old, you're finally tipping the halfway till 25 from your 20s. So 25 is closer than your 20s. Your 20s is like young and free. 25 is old and adult and you have responsibilities.
So like 20 is belly button tequila shots and 25 is like mortgage, taxes.
Exactly. Hello and welcome to Films and Fika, the podcast where we fika and talk about movies. Joining us is Mao from his empty void of whiteness, and me, Algot, with my newly installed movie wall. It's very nice, actually. I can give you some close-ups later, Mao, but it's screenshots from my favorite movies, essentially.
I think that's really cool. And
I really like
about the white background. It's like... No, it's depressing. It's depressing as hell, but I have nothing back there. Like it's there's really not much I can do.
I can send you a postcard of my butt cheek so you can just put it on the wall or something.
I think that would get us demonetized.
Oh.
We don't really make money out of this though.
Win-win. The wall here is essentially I can give you some photos for the YouTube version of this that you can see right now. Essentially, it's screenshots that I've collected through the days of like, so if I watch a movie and like, oh, that's a nice shot, I scroll backward in the film a bit and I screenshot it, and I've put all of these in a folder, went over the folder, picked up my favorite ones. So there's a lot of In the Mood for Love on here and such screenshots. I realized that there's a lot of similar color palettes and such. But it's beautiful, and it... you know what they say? I don't know who says it, but some people probably claims that you should surround yourself with art. So this is my attempt, or my interpretation, rather, of that.
I mean, first of all, regarding the similar color palettes,
yeah,
it's part of developing your visual aesthetic, right? Especially because you've always had like a knack for the visual aspect of filmmaking. I think it makes sense that you're leaning towards certain color palettes and certain aesthetics, and that's how you eventually get to build your own. And then on the other hand, if you really think about it, if you surround yourself with the type of things that you like, and especially with art, I feel like, at least for me, it is really nice to be constantly... And that kind of comes back to the home screen thing that I was telling you about when it came to like my phone. I put screen grabs on it too, of films that I really enjoy, films that I really like.
And both you and I usually do that. I mean, before iOS, whatever you were up to now, 13, 12... before that, both you and I even did our backgrounds of our phones, usually in some movie. Like right now I have the Algot from Star Wars as my background, always in a movie theme, more or less so.
Yeah, 100%. It was always kind of like a thing with our phones. And I feel like it's just because it's our taste, and it comes with the territory of being a movie geek, is that you tend to enjoy and tend to focus on things that other people might be like, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty picture. But I don't know, I feel like lately, the more that I work and the more that I've been watching film, because, you know, that's basically all I do, you start really appreciating what went behind the making of a specific moment in a film.
Something that I've been thinking a lot about in my own time, as I have way too much time to think on my own, more than I should be allowed to. No, I don't know. There's a lot of talk about boomers and Gen Zs and millennials and everything. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying with the entire conversations of generation? I'm not sure if it's active as it used to be, but it has made me think. Because for the longest time, I've always seen myself as a millennial, or being able to identify myself with millennials. But now I feel like Gen Zs are treading onto social platforms and such, and they're given more publicity, possibly through their hate of boomers and that entire conflict that I'm not buying into necessarily.
Yeah.
Because if you look into articles that claim different things and everything, you and I are definitely on the border of the generation gap. So
yes.
Do you, as of late, I have more identified myself as a Gen Zer, which is kind of cringy to admit, considering.
Yes.
But it's true, I guess. It's weird because on one hand, I'm definitely that coffee hipster millennial that enjoys a good avocado toast. But on the other hand, TikTok is a cool social medium, I guess. I don't know what I identify in Gen Z. I can't really pinpoint it, but there's a lot of things that applies to me more, I guess. Do you have a similar dilemma, or is that only me?
I think so. I understand what you're talking about, definitely, because you said it right. Like we're in the border of both of them, and because we're not in the US, basically, because I guess US and Canada, sure,
fair enough,
which means we get pop culture delay, right? Like I don't know how bad it was in Sweden, but when it comes to pop culture before, I would say 2016 even, I would still say there's still some delay right now, but not as much as before. But there's so many things that millennials claim to have grown up with that I got while I was growing up with, even though I'm on the later bit of a millennial, solely because of culture delay, right? Where it's like things get big in the US and then they slowly start to trickle down to Mexico. And that's when we would get them. But that slow trickle meant years sometimes, you know, like movies would come out here years after in the US, or TV shows or certain tech appliances and things like that, you know, marked a generation per se. So there's things like, you know, you watch these videos where a millennial is like nostalgia, and then they show a montage of things that they grew up with. And I'm like, I can identify 14 out of those 15 things that you just mentioned, even though I might not necessarily be a millennial. And like you said, because it depends on what article you read, whether you're a millennial or not, it becomes like a weird conflict of like, I don't know, right? And then you watch a similar montage from like Gen Z where they're like, do you remember these cartoons? Or like, our generation of cartoons were better. And I'm like, well, yes, I also got that. So it's a weird, I definitely get your your confusion. Yeah.
And I agree to everything what you just said. That rings true to me. I'm not sure if it's necessarily for me cultural delay, but Sweden usually is playing sort of a catch up with the rest of the world in some ways. What makes me wonder if it is that the new generation is finding its own voice per se, if that's a thing that's happening currently, and they're establishing themselves as something identifiable, as something relatable.
Well, you have the fact that, let's say that we are the last little bit of millennials. That means that the early start of Gen Z would be people who are aged like my brother, who are just starting to become, so let's call them 17 to 20-year-olds, basically. Which is when you really start getting a voice in social media other than you making cringy posts.
Yep.
Like if you look at your social media history,
oof.
First of all, you know, take a couple of shots because you're gonna need that liquid courage.
I've been wanting so bad to go back on my Facebook history, down my Facebook feed, because I never have deleted my Facebook as so many people have, which is a wise choice. But I don't want to go through that emotional discourse of deleting my own posts and But do go on.
Right. So like there comes a point where you will you start going down your social media history, and you will notice that there's a clear break between your cringy posts and what you would say or at least more acceptable types of posting. And also because these guys were subject to social media so much earlier than we were. Like, I don't know when you got a Facebook, but I was older than a lot of the people who have Instagram now, for example, right? And so they kind of like developed a little bit faster in that sense. But also what I'm trying to get at is they're starting to come out of their cringy phase. And so, like you said, they're starting to finally kind of like really start saying what they actually want to say and what they mean. And I think it's definitely an interesting moment for them and for us being you and me. Because we're starting to see that maybe because we are in such a like middle ground when it comes to millennials and Gen Z, that you might start relating to both of them for sure. And I think it depends on the day.
No, it does. It does. Ultimately, I feel like generations, I mean, sure, as a concept it makes sense, but I feel like at least through social media, I don't feel like it's necessarily as big as a thing in real life talking to people, but on social media some people really have their generation as their sole identity, and there's such a discourse between generation. Always has been. That's a true phenomena if you look into history and psychology and all of that good jazz.
For sure.
But I'm just tired of that discourse. Like, just let the new generation be cool and do new innovative things. And it's difficult. It's easy to say now, and then when we ourselves find ourselves on our front porch, we're gonna not appreciate the new young generation. But still, it's stupid and a waste of energy.
Well, the thing is, because they have great ideas, right? Like, they are a driving force. They are the future. I get all of that. But they're also really fucking dumb.
Okay. Go on.
And that's always going to be a thing, right? Because there are certain things that only get to you while you grow up and while you experience things. And that's when you finally start assimilating them. So obviously, I feel that discourse always going to be a thing. It's always going to be a thing within our society, because you will have people who are in generations who are getting older and who are finally starting to get not life, but at least like adulting per se, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have at the same time a group of people who are in a new generation who are going to be filming YouTube videos in the middle of the suicide forest in Japan. And you're like, that is fucking stupid. But I guess you have to make those mistakes, like,
yeah.
It's always going to be a thing.
So, recommendation of the week. That was my little introduction. I'm working on it.
Maybe you should do something on the ukulele, like a little jingle.
No. Do you want to go first, or should I?
You can go first.
I have a very timely recommendation. As you might know, The Mandalorian Season 2 is released, or it is out right now, which is amazing. I have myself just binged Mandalorian Season 1 throughout the span of this week.
Did you like it?
It is okay. It is. I don't know how to summarize my feelings about the show itself.
Because the thing is, I haven't seen it, right? I haven't seen it.
I would like to tell, or I have already actually have the opportunity to tell people that you don't have to have seen Star Wars previously. There is a lot of fan service, a few references, but straight up there's fan service to Star Wars fans, but there's no need to having seen Star Wars previously in order to appreciate The Mandalorian. And they're definitely going back to the roots of the original references of old Kurosawa movies and westerns.
Cool.
References or inspirations of George Lucas's. And you can definitely see that in the show itself, which I appreciate a lot. So it doesn't have as strong of a Star Wars identity, but it's definitely comparable to Rogue One and such side stories of the saga. But I'm not completely impressed by it. And
storytelling wise,
writing wise, might be because it's Favreau, but let's not get into it.
Is it Favreau?
Favreau have written most part of it. Dave Filoni, however, I love Filoni, has done a lot of work onto it. But it's cool. It has a big collaboration between Taika Waititi, Dave Filoni, I forget. There's a whole bunch of great directors who's collaborating with each other and has done a few episodes of their own.
I love when you like actually remember people's names and we can have a conversation where I know exactly who and what you're talking about when it comes to filmmakers.
Dave Filoni, if you don't know about him, is the guy who made or is the main director of Clone Wars.
Yeah. Oh my god. Who are you? Who this bitch right now?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I
thought I was going to be nice and brief you on who the people are.
Oh, I love that you know. Usually our conversations go, oh, you know, like it was that guy that I hate. He worked on that movie, you know, with the... You know who I'm talking about. And I'm like, no, Algot, I have no clue who you're talking about.
I don't have to continue if you don't want to.
Sorry, please do go ahead. I am enjoying this a lot.
What I'm gonna recommend is, fittingly, as The Mandalorian Season 2 is released, it is the Disney Gallery Star Wars The Mandalorian. It is just as many episodes, approximately as long as the show itself, of behind the scenes. So they go through directors' roundtables, and they go through puppetry, the cool LED screens and the CGI that they have.
Fuck, that's awesome.
As well as they like bring it back to the roots and talking about the inspiration for this one through the old Star Wars movies and the connections that the directors themselves have to Star Wars. So that's a great thing, especially since I've now recently been invested in director's commentary. It's great to just fully immerse yourself in behind the scene content and really see what is going behind the scenes. A lot of it is on YouTube. If someone like that I know and I'm very close to lives in Mexico, where Disney Plus has not yet been released, but the full length episodes are on Disney Plus. Just look up Disney Galleries, The Mandalorian. Great stuff, actually. It's really fun to see a behind the scene content from the perspective of filmmakers rather than only interviews with the characters, or actors, I should say. Here they really go into the nitty gritty, and they don't they use terms and such and really respect the viewer to know what such things as blocking are and intent, and they just give you the stuffs.
That sounds really, really cool. I think that's a great recommendation.
Thank you.
Anyways, my recommendation, which I think I've done before media-wise, I don't know. I think I've recommended a book on this show before.
Once, yeah.
Okay, so this is the second time I recommend book, and I know that it, like, for most of you, it might be like, why are you recommending books if it's a movie podcast? But it's about what we've been enjoying recently, and I've been, for the first time, I think, in my life, I think it has to do with a lot of the fact that we had time to do stuff. I've been consuming a lot of horror stuff because it's October, which I never gave a shit about, but now I give a shit about, I guess. And I've been consuming horror films, and I've been consuming a lot of different like horror stuffs, including books. And I read this book, and it's called The Troop. And it's about a scout master in Canada and his scout troop. There are 5 of them, like 5 boys and him, and they take a weekend trip to an island close to the town that they live in to do their whole like scout challenges for the badges and whatnot. It's written by Nick Cutter, and I've read horror before. It really never gets to me per se. Like I enjoy it and it's like, ooh, this is fun. Like The Shining and stuff like that. This is the first time that I actively had to take breaks while reading it. Nice. Like I could have finished this book in a sitting for sure. It took me a week because it is so gross. It is so disgusting. And it is so graphic in its depictions. Because basically what happens is that they go to this island, they get dropped off there by a boat, and then they're supposed to come and get them on Monday. But then on the first night, someone comes to the island as well, and this person is infected by some type of disease that makes you hungry, but like irrationally hungry. You just want to eat everything. You eat dirt and insects and all of this stuff. So that's the premise. And there's so much going on within the characters, and it's told in such an interesting way. And the descriptions of it are legitimately, sometimes they're so graphic. I had to be like, yeah, I have to put this down. I'm going to move on with my day because it is insane. Just icky. Just body horror. So if you're into that type of shit, give it a read. It's written by Nick Cutter. I think I said that before, but it's definitely super cool. And I low-key want to make a movie from it, which I don't know if the rights are out. I think they might already be bought, obviously, because Hollywood owns everything that's cool. But it would be such a fun thing to make, for sure.
Nice. This week, we're going to talk about the very exciting movie Mother by Darren Aronofsky. It's a... is it classified as a horror, actually? I would say it's a psychological thriller, but...
It's classified as a horror, mystery, and as a drama.
We got our dear Hunger Game girl Jennifer Lawrence in the lead, playing the mother. And of course Darren Aronofsky is a unique filmmaker. How much of his films have you seen previously, before this or leading up to now?
I've seen from Darren Aronofsky,
because I've only seen Requiem for a Dream and that other film. I've been meaning to watch The Fountain.
I love that other film.
What film was released before Mother?
Noah?
Oh, before Noah?
I don't. The Black Swan?
Yeah, Black Swan.
Okay. When it comes to Aronofsky, I've seen Requiem because we went to film school, and I feel like it's one of those. It's like The Godfather or like Fight Club. Actually, I think it's more like Fight Club than The Godfather, where it's like,
yeah,
you haven't seen Fight Club, bro? I love that film.
It's so cool, man. Yeah, bro.
It's like he's fighting himself, bro. Oh, spoiler alert. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's Fight Club. You should have seen it already. Anyways, so Requiem I've seen. I saw Black Swan, and I've seen Noah. I haven't seen The Fountain or The Wrestler. I want to see The Wrestler, but I've also heard it's like depressing as shit, and I feel like it's one of those things where it's like I need to mentally prepare for that.
Considering it's about wrestlers, it's a surprisingly Aronofsky film.
Yeah.
Moral of the story: the director is fucked as a person, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, so there's so many things about Mother ! Which I used to think, you were such an asshole for pointing it out, but from what I've been like looking into the film, it is actually important. Like it is it's ! It's Mother !
Yeah.
Which is hilarious to me. I love it because there's a whole and because it's like there's a whole explanation behind it, and I'm like, dude, that's the type of pretentious I want to be, right? Where it's like, yes, everything has meaning.
Dude, when the title comes up when watching the film, it's Mother, and then the fades in with the !
Yeah, for sure. So, and there's a whole reason behind it. And here's the thing about Mother. I've seen it 3 times, and this can like serve as my quickie review if you want it. No spoilers. Yep. I've seen it 3 times. This is the 3rd time I've seen it. Every time I see it, I enjoy it more. The first time I saw it, I remember being like, okay, I can see why everyone is like, oh, that movie's fucked up, because it's fucked up. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of like my takeaway. Like, I'd never really, you know, whatever. And then the second time I watched it, I saw it with my ex. And I kind of like sat there and I was like, oh shit, like, okay, I think I can get into this. You know, like I can actively... Mm-hmm. be on board with this film, which, you know, makes sense because of who I am as a person. I understand why I would be on board with this film. And then I saw it this time for the podcast and I was like, dude, this movie, I think it slaps. I don't think it's perfect. I definitely don't think it's perfect. And I think I understand where the controversy comes from for a lot of people. But, you know, watching it, first of all, I think it's really well crafted and I think it's really well thought out. And I also really enjoy Jennifer Lawrence, which apparently is like a hot take. But yeah, quickie review, no spoilers. I think it's fun. I think it's, well, not fun. That's not the word. I'm sorry. I think it's a good movie. I think it's really well done. And I would definitely recommend it to a very specific group of people. I don't think I would go around recommending this film to everyone. And I think that's a very like Darren Aronofsky thing to do.
Yeah.
What about you, Algot? Tell me about it.
It definitely has rewatchability. That's something that both you and I really appreciate. This one more than most rewatchable movies, because there are things that are revealed by the end that makes sense the second time around earlier in the film. I like it. I think it's really cool. Out of the few Aronofsky films that I've seen, and mind you, the style of Aronofsky is not my preferred type of movie. I can appreciate it, but as it always comes down to, you need to be in a certain mindset to appreciate it to full extent. Black Swan to me is just like cringy and disgusting and such. Requiem didn't really have a big impact on me. I think Fountain could resonate with me quite a lot, but Mother, not that it had an impact on me, but it has definitely sat with me from the first watch. It really made me invested in the small details that I missed, and I read through a bunch of articles. I listened to a lot of podcast episodes about Mother, exclamation point. Even though it's not the best movie I've ever seen, it really stuck with me, and that gives it some credit.
Would you recommend it?
Yeah. It's a beautiful film, because great acting, great writing. I would recommend it. If you're up for a mindfuck, let's say, a brain twister. If you're up to see and experience some shit, I could recommend it. I wouldn't. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to like restrict it to just the film bros or so. I think a lot of people could appreciate the film.
Here's how I would put it: as if you're the type of person who understands that film is not always meant to make you happy.
Yep.
For sure. If you understand that that the idea behind a film is just to elicit a reaction, and that's definitely something that will happen with this film, then sure, give it a go. Like I said, I think it's just really well crafted.
Art is meant to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. Boom.
My God. Can that be our title for the podcast? That just that was...
It summarizes it somewhat.
I agree though. I agree. Yeah.
Darren Aronofsky himself said in an interview that he sees Mother exclamation point as a spoiler-free movie, in the sense that if you have been spoiled, quote unquote, a scene or whatever, it will still have quite an effect on you seeing the movie because it's so impactful. It's so crazy.
Oh my God. Is this the first time that we're going to talk about a movie and you and I are both equally prepared and researched?
Probably. I am fairly researched on Mother, exclamation point. It's one of those films.
I think this is going to be cool.
Terribly sorry. So do with that what you will. If you want to listen to the spoiler talk somewhat, but there will be legitimate spoilers. Just know that the director himself sees it as a spoiler-free movie, and you will not lose value being spoiled the film.
Definitely. No, I honestly, I think there's people who believe that all films are spoiler, like...
Yeah, me too, to an extent.
Like spoiler proof, like you can't really spoil a movie. But this is definitely one that is so dependent on you sitting through it and the emotions that it brings out from you because of the fact that you're sitting through this movie, that even if you know what's going to happen, it still might affect or might elicit a reaction that you might not have seen coming, just because there's certain things that they can spoil you, but when you see them, you're like, oh shit, like, oh, what the, it's still like a thing. So I agree. If you want to stick around for the conversation and then we inspire it within you that you will go watch it, please stick around.
Nevertheless, spoiler warning.
Yes.
Do you even want to give a summary as we normally do for the film, or is that redundant in this case?
So officially, Mother is about a poet and his wife and how their relationship is tested when uninvited guests start arriving at their home and disrupting their tranquil existence. So that's the official synopsis. I guess we can start with a little bit of the background that we know from the film. Javier Bardem's character. We haven't done that. So Mother was released in 2017. It's directed by Darren Aronofsky. It stars Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, Ed Harris, Mitchell Pfeiffer, Donald Gleason, Kristen Wiig, among others. And so the movie starts with Javier Bardem's character, and we understand that he's a poet who had a really good piece of work but hasn't been able to write anything since. And Jennifer Lawrence is this new partner, this new wife that he has, and he calls her muse, and he credits her for rebuilding his house, which had burned down previously. So she rebuilt the house from the ashes, literally. And he believes that he might be able to start writing again. And that's basically where the movie starts, right? With Javier Bardem placing this gem on a pedestal and then it giving life to the movie. This after we see the first shot of the movie, which is of a woman on fire, which I feel is like, wow, like if you're going to start a movie, right?
Yeah. Not only that, the opening sequence, right after we see a woman burning alive, the opening sequence is Jennifer Lawrence waking up, not finding her husband. They are married, right? Yeah. She's not finding Javier next to herself, and she goes around the entire building, and we establish every room. And dude, I've seen some lighting plans of this place. The lighting is amazing. Because it's a one big long shot. She's just walking around the room, and it's a great opener to the movie. And
also it kind of sets the tone for the fact that this movie is not necessarily grounded in reality, quote unquote. The opening shot of the woman on fire and then the whole house being rebuilt, that kind of puts you in perspective of what it is. But also while you're following Jennifer Lawrence around the house for that first kind of like tracking of like establishing shots of the house, she has like a glow behind her, like a soft, like she's a glowing person, like she's something other than human. Tell me about like what your interpretation is and like what your experience watching the film is.
So on a first watch, I wouldn't say that I went into this movie completely in the dark. I definitely had heard about babies taking place and devoured ultimately, and such a things, and the disturbing images that is Mother. But I forget if I explicitly were told, but I do remember there had been going into it knowing that there were some religious aspects to it.
Okay.
Then again, I didn't catch on to those necessarily up until the latter part when they start preaching, and there's a lot of prophecies. No, what you call them?
Prophets,
Yeah, there's a lot of prophets and
preachers,
rituals taking place.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was pretty much unclear of what the metaphor of the movie was for the bigger aspect of the movie. I was sitting there trying to figure out what the poet, because as you say, the movie is not grounded at all. It's never interpreted as anything but a metaphor for something bigger.
Yeah, for sure.
To summarize it though, what I gathered from it on a first watch was conflicted, but the best interpretation I had was that the poet Javier was a creative mind, and being a poet or creating something, Jennifer Lawrence would probably be his, if not the inspiration, the creation itself, and the house also holding that sort of symbolism.
Yeah.
Yet the publicity, because there's a big crowd of users or PR stunts taking place with the PR manager, whoever that is. Is it Emily
Kristen Wiig?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really breaking it down. Though the baby seems obviously religious, so that's where the conflict came in on my aspect. But the best interpretation was simply as the poet creating something and it being destroyed by people's using or consuming the entertainment that he produced, being Jennifer Lawrence, being the building. On a first watch. What about you?
I mean, I didn't go that far either, because on the first watch, I caught on the religious ideas of it, and I understand the deeper point that he's trying to make.
It's really hard to catch those though on a first watch because they're very minimal.
Yeah, they're not overt, right? Once you hear of them and once you actually kind of catch them on, especially as someone who's from Mexico, I come from a very religious household up until a certain point. So I know a lot about I wouldn't say I know a lot about the Bible, but I know the basics of it. And so the really obvious ones do jump out at you and you're like, yes. Okay. So I caught up on those and I understood that he was trying to, talk about Mother Nature and this whole idea of her just a little bit, mostly because like you said, you hear about all of this stuff and, Darren Aronofsky had no issue telling everyone who interviewed him what the movie was about for him. And I understand and I get what he's trying to get at. And, there's the obvious idea that Jennifer Lawrence and the house are connected because of, the scenes where she touches the house and she can see the beating heart of it, which I think is such a cool visual aspect of the movie. But no, for me, the first time that I saw it, the thing that I took away the most is this idea of a tortured artist and a creator, and how as a creator, we're so blinded sometimes and within our own writing and this idea of writer's block, but also by the fact that you just want someone to like your stuff and how easily it is for someone who constantly is in the process of trying to create something, and how it can become very easily at that all about the adoration and the fame and the celebrity that comes with it. And like for me, the scene that really kind of drove that point home was right after the first man arrives. I guess we can call him the surgeon. I think he's credited as man. So
Ed Harris.
Yeah. So when Ed Harris shows up and he's just having a good time with the poet, and then Jennifer Lawrence is like, oh, you're having a good time. I'm happy then, whatever. And he's like, yes, it's just so good to finally talk to someone who gets my work and who likes my work. And she's like, I love your work. And he's like, yeah, but it's different. And I was like, dude, because those are things that we've all felt at some point, where it's like, I will write a script or I will make a short and I will show it to my friends. I will show it to my family. And, it's very weird for them to be like, this is crap. Even with this podcast, it's hard. And I don't know if you felt for like this at some point, where you receive feedback or you receive comments of it from people that you are close to, and you're like, yeah, but you're kind of obligated to say that, like, how do I? And that's just like our own mind fucking with ourselves, right? Like, of course, why would they lie? Like, why is our first instinct to think that they're lying? But yeah, so on a first watch, I really like the idea of it being about a tortured artist and how fame and celebrity become this thing where it's like, I am, as a celebrity or as an artist, I am willing to let the audience and my fans into my life so personally that it feels like they're in my home. And it feels like, because the baby can be interpreted as his creation, whatever this artist is creating, be it a film, a record, a book, and how it's just devoured by society. And how do you follow that up, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you pour yourself into it. There's really nothing more personal for you than this piece of work that you just made, and people devour it in a couple of seconds, and then they're asking for more and asking for more. And you're like, how do I keep up with that?
To talk about a different aspect of the movie, it's that like on the technical or aesthetic aspects, it is absolutely gorgeous to look at, but not only the photography itself, the composition, but the way that they focus in. There's always these close-up, extreme close-ups of Jennifer Lawrence, and we follow her streamlined. Mm-hmm. There's no question about who's the main character. It's Jennifer Lawrence. She's in the main focus throughout the entire movie. Aronofsky actually mentioned that it was difficult because they didn't have any other shots. So it's all on Jennifer to deliver.
Yeah, she's like always on. She's always on the frame. Like, and not only is she always on frame, it's always like close-ups or medium shots. Like I think there's like 2 wide shots.
Yeah, sure. It's very much on her. But on top of that, there's this very cool feeling because it's very intimate with her as a character. It's very much from her perspective, subjectively, everything. But I think they're using some sort of motion tracking. I mean, there's definitely a Steadicam aspect that is following her and, again, increasing the subjectivity of it all. But we follow her down on the ground and up and through every room. And that just works so well, I must say. There's very stylistic aspects to it when she has her breakdowns and we see the entire background shifting and everything. But yeah, like the aesthetic of it all, amazing.
Yeah, especially because I don't know how much it gets to you, but the idea of having people inside of my house is nerve-wracking to me. It is nerve-wracking to me. I don't know, like, I know it has to do with how I was like brought up by my parents and this idea that, you know, my house is my safe space and stuff. And so like the idea of having people in that space, it is so I don't know, it's so fucking weird to me. And like, especially when these people are not invited, right? I get anxious when I invite them and I'm like super happy to have you there, but then I'm like, do I have to be your host? Do I have to be friendly to you? Can I just go on with my life? What if you break something? I don't want you to be uncomfortable, but you did just like break something. Like, you know, like these so many things. And then you, in this movie and other movies like Funny Games by Michael Haneke that deal with home invasion, fuck. I can't, like, it is such an anxiety thing for me. And because of the way it's shot, like you said, you're so in it with her in this journey that everything that gets put forth is so personal and it's so intimate to see how she's such a pushover, you know? That is just...
Yeah. And I feel like even though you're not fully able to relate to what you're saying there, this movie is definitely succeeding in bringing you into the shoes of Jennifer Lawrence, and it's explaining. I think it has to do with like the pacing, possibly editing, or just the way it's written, because the tension is slowly built and the stakes are growing higher and higher. As more people start to intervene, or forcibly invites themselves into the house. It's nerve-wracking, and that's where this movie really shines, is that it puts you on through an emotional roller coaster. 100%. Man, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I feel like everything is thought to put you in that headspace. Because I watched it for the podcast and no one in my house wanted to watch it with me, I had to end up watching it on my computer, and so I watched it with headphones on. And
did you notice that there is like almost no score throughout the entire film?
Yes, so there's like two things I want to talk about in terms of sound. First one is the no score thing. And I heard on an interview with Darren Aronofsky that Johan Johansson? I think it is. Yeah, Johan Johansson did the score. And they have like a full like composed score that they're trying to figure out what to do with it, because apparently it's really, really good, but it didn't fit with the story because Jennifer Lawrence was so good. And I agree, she's fucking amazing. Like, I think she's fucking amazing. But secondly, I never noticed how much thought was put into the sound design, like the beating house of the heart, the beating heart of the house, and the small, weird, like twinkly, clicking sounds that sometimes come from like the weird yellow elixir that she drinks.
Or
all those little things,
glasses cheering and such.
Especially, it kind of puts you in a certain headspace. But then as the movie progresses, like after the second half of the movie, where everything starts going batshit crazy, the constant like sound of the people, of the chanting, of the chaos is just so fucking good. Yeah, man, it's insane.
So, should we break it down to literally the first half of the movie and then the second half of the movie?
For sure.
Whereas the second half of the movie, it's just going batshit crazy.
It is. It really fucking is.
I feel like a quick rundown of the first half for someone that might not have seen it. Someone that might have, not seen it or haven't seen it in a while. We're first introduced to Tom's character. No, Ed Harris. Wow. Credited as the man.
Yes.
He's the one who's first invited by the poet. Turns out that he's a bit of a creep, but Javier, the man, is not too bothered by this because he finds such an inspiration with this man. All of a sudden, he's puking all over and he's missing a rib from his rib cage.
Yeah.
Soon thereafter, Michelle Pfeiffer, who is apparently Ed Harris's husband or wife. Sorry. Comes in there, and she's a total bitch, by the way.
Oh my god, I know. She's such a bad guest. She is such a bad guest, and it like, I don't know. It puts me on nerve.
So well with the subjectivity from Jennifer Lawrence that we're just like the small glances that she makes only to Jennifer.
And the fact that
cool.
Yeah, because like you said, it is such a subjective thing because she might not even like be doing that, you know, but because we're only privy to what Jennifer character is like going through. We feel like this bitch has something against her, and like she's trying to put her on edge, and she's trying to be mean and like whatever. But also, are we talking about like as we go through the movie, do you want to talk about what supposedly things mean in regards to like Aronofsky's actual interpretation of the film?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up these two sons and then we'll cover that.
Yeah,
because apparently the two of them, Pfeiffer and the guy, has two sons that also intrude into this house, and they're having this huge argument. Of course, it's just building up and building up, because before this they've had argues with Pfeiffer and everything. Ultimately, one of the sons kills the other sons out of jealousy, and the murderer bolts. The guy ends up dying at a hospital. Jennifer is left alone cleaning up the mess of the pool of blood, which is just dripping down into the basement, and more blood is accumulating and is rotting the wood from the inside. That's essentially the first half of the movie.
Yes.
So what's the symbolism?
I would go a little bit further.
Yeah, okay.
In the sense of like, after that they come back, like Javier Bardem comes back from the hotel, like the poet comes back from the hospital, and he's like, oh, you know, I'm sorry that I left you. Which, by the way, man, like, I know that some people might interpret this film as like a very fucked up breakup, toxicity relationship film.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's so there, and it pisses me off, man, how like he just brushes her off all the time, where it's like she witnessed the murder, right? She was the one who saw this whole thing happen, and he feels like the need to go with these two other people solely because they're like his fans. Like, what the why How, like, do wedding vows mean shit to people? And so he comes back, they fall asleep, and then she wakes up because she hears people inside the house. And it's because they, like, Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer, man and woman, have come back to the house, followed by a procession of people to hold a what's it called, a vigil?
I have no idea.
Fuck. Anyways, basically it's like it's not a funeral because the body's not there, but it's like a place for them to grieve. And Javier Bardem like comes out of the bathroom and he's like, oh, they got here faster than I thought. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, oh, you know, they needed a place to like grieve and process their hurt and all this crap. And then people start showing up, and they keep showing up, and they start making a mess, and they don't care, and they start going into places where they're not allowed to. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this guy is starting to paint their house in order to redeem themselves for some reason. Oh, it's the least thing we can do. And that's where it tips over for me. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Dude, honestly, it's like, for me, and again, it might not be such an obvious thing for certain people, but I know that you and I are very conscious of the fact that you're in someone else's space. And, you know, like after a while, sure, because there's a friendliness to it. One's like, for example, like keeping us as an example, there were moments in our college experience where you would come over and like we would edit through the weekend, and you know, I would fall asleep, you would fall asleep, you would make breakfast, I would make dinner, whatever. There's a familiarity that comes from the fact that you and I have like a friendship and whatever, right? But it's not like the first time that you showed up at my apartment, you were like, so, and then started going through my shit, and like, you know, there's certain guidelines as a guest that you should keep in mind, I guess. And I agree, like watching these people not give a living crap about, you know, what they're doing inside someone else's house. Oh, fuck. It makes me so uncomfortable, and it makes me want to strangle every single one of them, especially when it's like, she keeps telling the people to get off of the sink because it's not braced yet. And especially, I think the key point to this is that before all these strangers have come into the house, the movie has made it very clear that she has spent so much time rebuilding every centimeter of this house that when things start to go haywire and people start fucking up the house, you can feel the fucking aggression and pain from Jennifer Lawrence's point of view, where it's like, how long did she spend working on this thing, man? Like, it's insane. So it's the middle of the funeral thing. People keep sitting on this fucking sink. She keeps telling them to get down. And then like they get down, she turns around and they get back up. And it's like a couple of times that this happens until they like actually break the sink. And then everything gets wet. The house starts like getting flooded. And that's when Jennifer Lawrence kind of like snaps for the first time. And then everyone leaves. I would say that's the middle point of the movie. Sure.
And she kicks everybody out successfully. Finally. And then it's only her and the man left. They argue. And then as you do, you have makeup sex.
Makeup sex.
And then she wakes up the day after and says, I'm pregnant. As you do. Mm-hmm. So that's the mid point.
For sure. I agree.
That's actually one. I don't even care about it making much sense, but that's something that I don't really agree with in the movie. Is like up till this point we'll follow them more or less so beat by beat, hour per hour, day by day in such a streamlined fashion. And at that point when she realizes that she's pregnant, as you do, we cut to, I don't know,
straight
9 months later.
Yeah, pretty much.
I wouldn't have minded just like a that it's kind of jarring to me, honestly. It could have been smoother. It doesn't have to make sense. It could be the day after and she's full on preggers for what the movie already has established for what it is.
I feel I agree. It definitely comes from like out of left field. Like you don't see it coming. And it's also very much like the midpoint in the sense of like the pacing of it even changes, right? Yes. Like I feel there's a definite like first part and second part to this movie, where the first part I think is definitely more open to interpretation, where like the first part of the movie is where you can see this whole idea of, oh, you know, the tortured artist or like the toxic relationship or anything. And then the second half of this film is definitely Aronofsky's just like, this is my allegory, this is the metaphor, like you know. It's so intense.
Sure. But at the same time, the second part of the movie, there's so many things happening, so you would think, but I guess what you're saying is true. So what are the symbolisms in the first half, at least?
So I feel like the obvious ones and the ones that, you know, people definitely, at least on a second viewing, caught up with were Adam and Eve. Like Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer are definitely Adam and Eve, and this idea of like, oh, you know, they're the first humans to come into Earth or paradise or whatever it is that you want to call it. And the allegory gets reinforced every time that Michelle Pfeiffer tries to go into the poet's office and look at the gem that he has in there, even though she's been repeatedly told not to. And eventually she's the one who takes Adam into the office and they break the rock, which is in this case like the forbidden fruit of paradise.
And I mean, the poet is even locking them out through barricading the doors to Garden of Eden.
Exactly. And, you know, we understand that Michelle Pfeiffer's Eve because of what you said, where it's like him and God, or sorry, spoiler alert, I guess. But basically, people think that Javier Bardem's character, the poet, is God, and Jennifer Lawrence is Mother Nature. So
and the house would be nature itself.
Yeah, like
or
Earth.
Or
So then Adam or Ed Harris or however it is that we want to keep calling the dude and Javier Bardem are having like a jolly good time. They're getting fucked up, and then Jennifer Lawrence wakes up and she hears that this guy's puking, and so she goes to check up on him, and he's like bent over the toilet, and you see that, like you said, like he has a very deep cut right where one of the ribs would be, and then suddenly the next day Michelle Pfeiffer shows up, so you're like, oh, I got it, you know, she was created from his rib. Great. And then Cain and Abel are the two
Obvious.
sons.
Yeah.
Yes, like that is such a whoa.
Yeah, but it can fly over your head fairly easily. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And this is why I love it as a midpoint and as a metaphor and as everything. The sink is a metaphor for the great flood, the whole like Noah's Ark thing, where it's like in the Bible there's this idea or there's allusions to the fact that God has reset humanity a couple of times, where he's like, oh, no, we're not going the way that this should be going, and then he creates some sort of catastrophe that ends it. And I love that because if you think about it, it's like it's the poet and Jennifer Lawrence for a certain amount of time, where she's working on the house, you know, and once the house is done or close to being finished, people start showing up, that being us. And they're always invited by him, you know, because of this whole fucked up mentality that he has, that he needs to be adored. And then people show up, society happens, and then society starts getting fucked up and something happens, and then she banishes everyone from the house. And then it's him and her again only, and they're creating this thing. In this case, it's the baby, and for him, it's his piece of work. And then society shows up again and starts fucking up everything. And I think I just love that as a midpoint for the movie.
Because I mean, moving through with the allegory from that point on, it's just getting crazier and crazier, and the pacing is definitely picked up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
100%. I think this is a good time to mention one thing that I haven't. It was a long time since I saw it the first time and read it up to it to the point. But what do you interpret it as, or what is the official symbolism of the yellow liquid medicine, let's call it, that Jennifer takes at times of anxiety, at times of overloadedness, if you can bend that word like Beckham. Basically, when she feeling overwhelmed, at the first part of the movie, she runs up to the bathroom and takes her meds in the form of a yellow liquid, and everything is fine. Of course, when she gets preggers, she flushes it down the toilet. What is that supposed?
I'm not gonna lie to you, Algot. I have researched this movie quite heavily, and I have never come across any sort of interpretation for the kind of like elixir thing that she drinks. And I think it's really interesting because you and I learned that if you want to make something stand out to the audience, you make it happen 3 times. And that's what happens with the beating heart of the house. We see it 3 times, and that's what happens with the elixir. We see it 3 times. She drinks it 3 times before she throws it down the drain, but I don't know what it means. Do you have any interpretation?
No, but what it does, the effect of it, is that it solves everything. I mean, of course, the trauma, or if you want to call it trauma, that makes her take the medicine in the first place, or anxiety attack would be a better description to what visually we're seeing. It is essentially anxiety pills, or well, instantly working anxiety pills. That would be a cool thing. So, you know, you would assume, Jennifer being Mother Nature, it would be a metaphor for her rehabilitating the damage done by human beings. But in a biblical sense, I didn't really apply it in a perfect sense. Of course, I didn't rewatch it looking only for that symbolism. So that's the effect of it, but I don't really know how it plays into everything. Maybe it comes to a point when she flushes it down the toilet where it's sort of a point of no return.
I'm not sure. Like, I'm really not sure, because I have it written down because I noted it. The first time that she drinks it is when like right after she sees Ed Harris has a cut in the back, And the poet is like, can you just give us some fucking space? And she like leaves. That's the first time that she drinks it. The second time that she drinks it is after the gem breaks. And she sees like Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer having sex, and you're like, what the fuck? So that's when she drinks it. And then the third time that she drinks it is at the funeral thing that they're having at their house. She starts like getting panicky because of all these people and the fact that they're just showing up and that they're just doing whatever they want with their house. And so she goes to the bathroom, she drinks it, and then someone comes into her bathroom, like her bedroom bathroom. And the guy, and I hated it because I was like, who the fuck does that? He opens the door, sees her there. She's like, hello, this is my personal bathroom. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just exploring. It's someone else. It's someone's house.
I know you are the way you are, but I didn't know that intrusion really hit you this hard. I'm gonna have to look specifically for that symbolism and trying to make up my own mind. If you are listening to this and have a good interpretation of your own, or if you've read somewhere that it could imply this and that, and we would love to hear it, because it's an interesting one, and I bet that it's definitely open to multiple interpretations. I would assume that they're environmentalists.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, for sure. Let us know if you have any thoughts on it. So it's the second part of the movie. She's pregnant. She's happy. The poet had a certain burst of fucking inspiration when like finding out that he has, managed to conceive a child with her. And they've been fine. They've been happy. They've been working in the house. They've been doing all of this stuff. And then he publishes his book. And I think this is a really cool moment too, where he shows it to her and she's like, this is fucking beautiful. And then he's like, of course, thank you so much. Like, do you really think so? Are you sure? And all of this other stuff. And then the next second, the publisher calls. Yeah. And she's like, who was that? And he's like, oh, it was my publisher. They loved it. And there's this moment in Jennifer's face. And that's why I can't believe that she wasn't nominated for this. But anyways, you see it in her face, this moment of like, kind of like a small betrayal where she thought she would be the first person to see this piece of work, because
naturally,
obviously, because they live together. Because also they don't really tell you when the movie is set. Obviously, like, it's not like, oh, it's 1970s, it's 2020, it's whatever. Because it's a metaphor. I get it. That's why the characters don't have names. Don't come at me. But how the fuck did he send it, right? Like, in that moment, this last time that I watched it, when he goes, it's my publisher, they loved it. I'm like, how did they get it? Did you fax it? Was it via email? Like... And sometimes, like, this is the type of thing that makes me hate myself sometimes, where it's like, oh my God, why are you fixating on this?
Just accept it, dude.
Anyways.
Yeah, no, she's definitely betrayed about the entire thing. And then, do I remember it correctly that, like, shortly thereafter, only minutes, only hours? Oh no, they're going on a romantic date the night of that, or something along those lines. And then, all of a sudden, the publisher is there, and a big crowd very excited to get
big crowd.
Their new poetry signed. And he's of course excited. She's of course let down because she was hoping for a romantic dinner with her husband. Only the two of them.
Like you said, it's a very subtle moment of Jennifer Lawrence being betrayed, let down, of like, my love for this dude is not enough.
Yeah.
Right?
And I feel like us as the audience are never too much... I mean, we don't see the poet as the villain necessarily or anything. We don't demonize him.
But he's an asshole.
He is an asshole. Like the way he's acting, he's greedy, I think is the best way to put it. He's just greedy for attention.
Yeah.
Jennifer is obviously not enough for him, even though he is enough for her. There's something bigger to gather from that, obviously. I can definitely see someone applying this in a romantic sense. I feel like we are pretty much applying it to the creative aspect of it all, just because we are more to that direction. But
of course,
it is nice of a movie that it can be interpreted in many ways.
But yes, they show up. They want autographs at first, but then they just want to be with him. They just want to talk to him.
I definitely see that as commentary on the humanity, or it's very human to want to be a part of something, to follow someone else's footstep into doom in this case, and even more so just on the basis of something written on a piece of paper.
I see it like very clearly as the birth of religion, like the idea of organized religion. And this could be my own personal bias. It could be so many other things, I guess. But for me, just this idea of, first of all, like you said, that he's not the leader of it, but he's not against it either. He loves this shit. Like, he's living for it. He enjoys every second of it. Where he's like, at first he kind of gives her some room, and he's like, oh, this is my lovely wife and my inspiration and whatever the hell. But that dies really quickly. He starts, like, first of all, he forgets that she exists completely.
Yeah.
But then he also starts just like eating it up, and he's focused on the fact that they love him, and he doesn't care about anything else.
Yeah, well, at first, wouldn't you say like that's the greed within him, to be appreciated, to be amongst what he created. And I feel like we feel that with Adam in this case, that he's just so appreciative of someone appreciating his creation. Well, and he's feeding off of that, but then he's lost in the crowd, literally. And later on we see him less and less, and while Jennifer is looking for him, more or less. She's trying to defend her territory as well, I guess. But I feel like we see some regret from him, the poet, as he finally catches up to her, while consumed to the idea of, well, the baby at that point. So I don't see him very much so demonized necessarily in the context of the movie.
I agree with you. It's never demonized. You're never put in a position where you're like, because here's the thing, right? Because we're seeing everything through her perspective, she never hates him. Right? The movie ends with him saying like, I'm jumping forward a little bit, but basically she burns down the house. She burns herself with it because they're technically one entity. He survives. And then he picks her up, lays her on the bed, or what's left of it at least. And she goes, I've given you everything. Like, I have nothing left to give. And he goes, you have your love for me. Like, you do still love me, right? And she says, yes. And that's why I feel like he's never put in a position where we resent him, quote unquote, because she never does. Right? Like you said, we can kind of catch the glimpses of he's an asshole, but that's mostly because we're audience members looking into this relationship, and you catch up on those things where it's like, he's an asshole.
I mean, she's hurt by his actions, but
exactly.
It's never a deal breaker.
And that's why I feel like it's never like, oh, this guy is like the worst person ever, because she never gets to feel that way. For her, it's like you said, she was hurt by her actions, but she never stops loving him, which is such a fucked up situation if you ask me. But
were you ever overwhelmed by the second part of the film, or did it ever lose you? Did you ever feel like you actively looked into it too much, or were you accepting the fast pace and the constant flashes of
Human history?
Human history, yeah.
I was overwhelmed the first time I saw this film, for sure. The first time, maybe even the second time, because there's so many things happen. Like, it never lost me, and I never was bored, and I was never like, oh, this is not believable, I'm out of here. Because I feel like the movie, by this point, has made it pretty clear that it's not anything other than a metaphor for something bigger.
Yeah, and I think it does a very good job with the progressive picking up of the pace and even the metaphors.
I agree. And but it did overwhelm me. It had such a reaction within me where it's like, some of that imagery is very graphic, and some of it is like, it's really well done. VFX, GFX, practically. Practical. It is so well done that your brain is trying to catch up with everything that's happening, and the way that it's shot in such a tight, quick paced manner, I did feel overwhelmed, especially when you start getting into the really fucked up shit, where like, because it starts with people coming into the house and you're like, okay, why? But okay, sure, it's happening. And then it's like, she takes this kid to the bathroom because he's about to pee himself, or he pees himself. And then she opens the other door to that same bathroom, and there's a line waiting to go into the bathroom. And then you see that everyone is just coming into the space. Yep. But things start really picking up when people are actually taking her shit. Like, they're just stealing everything that they own because they need proof that they were there and they were part of this experience. And like, because they made such a long journey that they need to take something from her. Which is where you start actually seeing a lot of the like environmental metaphor, where it's like, we take everything from Earth, we're assholes, we're douchebags, we don't care what's going to happen afterwards as long as you get your piece of what you're looking for.
But at the same time, it's not explicitly shown, but if you pay attention, at least on a second watch, you see people in the background painting and repairing, less people than the people that are ripping floorboards off. But I feel like that's a nice touch that they are.
Wait, really?
Yeah. There's so many details going on in the background. There are so many people on screen. But there is a glimpse of people attempting to repair the damage that is done. Mostly people going around painting stuff.
Okay. So here's the thing that I enjoy about this movie and that I really respect. It's that he said it himself, he's an optimist, right? Yeah. So even though he's not afraid of going to the really fucked up places, which we haven't touched on yet, but like, we're
getting to it.
But he is not afraid of showing up and telling us like, this is happening, and he's like, you signed up for this, right, bitch? Like, you're gonna live through it. The movie for me never feels bleak. It's never cut you down depressing. Like Requiem for a Dream.
Yes.
Or Black Swan, for that matter, which I love Black Swan, but it is such a fucking downer. And I never felt that with this.
They're not as open-ended per se, because Mother explanation point is sort of going into the future to an extent, or the end of it all. So we're not there yet currently. So in that sense, there is a glimpse of hope, even though in this storyline, it ends with fire. And then, of course, the baby is born. The entire sequence when he is watching over her holding the baby is creepy. Here we get a different perspective of the poet. That is true.
So well done, though. The pregnancy scene works so well because you haven't been able to take a breather up until they get into that room and she gives birth. And what works really well is like, you think, oh, she gave birth, we're going to be okay for a little bit. But then you have this moment of, I want to him being like, I want to be with my kid, and she's like, fuck no, buddy, because she knows, right? She knows what can happen, and the fact that he keeps being like, they just want to see him, I can't kick them out because they want to see him, and you're like, bro, kick them the fuck out.
I feel like, or at least to me, it's a sign of a good movie if you're able to be immersed, especially on a second watch, you know, knowing somewhat what's going to happen, and you find yourself just immersed to the point of being unable to remember to take notes. That's just a good sign of a good movie to me.
For sure. And honestly, that scene between the two of them is so subtle. It is very subtle in their acting. It's very subtle in the way it's shot, but it is so effective because you know what's coming. Yes. You think you know because, but you know that something bad can happen if she doesn't take care of this baby, right? And you know, I love how it comes back to this, and you know, it's such a small moment, but where it's like, you might be this baby's father, but I am her mother. I am his mother. He is my son. Like, you know, because I fucking birthed him from my insides.
Yeah. Where have you been the past months, just writing your poetry and spending time with people? And the edit from the point of her trying to stay awake, falling asleep, and that's the beat. And then, boom, back into it. He's out the door, the baby's in the air, he gives the baby to the crowd is crowd surfing the baby as...
And then it's fucking neck breaks.
It snaps like a twig.
And you're just like... It's such a moment.
Yeah, I sat in my sofa and like uttered to myself, oh my god. The sound design works so well. The practical / CGI, because there's a mix. Oh, man, it's cool.
The way it's shot, man. The way that she, like, you start following her through the crowd and you can only see like the glimpse of it, and then how it's framed so that you do see it. You see the neck, like, just it bends at an awkward angle, and
the crowd just dies.
Yeah. And then like you get this feeling of obviously her pain and her rage, and like just the idea that she's going there as an actress. Wow. But like the crowd starts crying too. Well, no. First they eat the baby. Let's not forget that part. That happens first. They eat the baby, which is obviously a visual representation of like when you eat the body of Christ in church and stuff like that. I get it.
I think there's even or maybe that's later. I think they're drinking along with it. Never mind.
And it's such a graphic moment as well. Like these are the moments, like it's a 3-part intense fucked up shit. Right? Like his baby breaks, the neck of the baby breaks, then you know they start eating him. And I'll get to the third one in a second. But basically, they start eating him, and they start crying.
You want to brief us on the third part there?
Of course. No, yeah. She loses her shit and starts fucking burn. Like, she becomes, like, full-on savage bitch, and I loved it. And then... Because you're like... Because it's been so long, right? It's been such a draining journey up to this point where you're like, can you please... do something about it other than telling them to stop, right? Like, take things into your own hands. And she does for a brief moment. And then she gets knocked down, I think she gets knocked down.
Yeah, they're starting to defend themselves, essentially.
Yeah, they fight back. And obviously there's like 150 of them and one of her. And holy shit.
Well, dude, the way it's shot, though. Whoa. You and I have spent some time editing punches and kicks and such, and it's difficult. But I don't know how they did it so well, because first of all, there's a lot of practical makeup taking place, and the punches really land Is the VFX? Is it just cheap editing tricks? Did they actually punch her? I don't know. For all that I know, she could be. And then they start ripping off her clothes, and it's so crazy and so I hate it and I love it. It's so real. It's so well done. I love that.
And we've been primed for this moment, because there's a smaller, lesser version of that when things start to go crazy within the house, where she falls down and people trample on her and she's fucking pregnant, and all you can think of is she's fucking pregnant.
Yes.
And people are like stepping on her and pushing her and kicking her and all this crap. So your brain has, made the connection that she can get hurt, right? Like she can get hurt even though she's supposed to be the symbol. She's supposed to be a metaphor for something else. She's also just a character, like a human character per se. And then you jump into this thing where it's, like you said, it's so well edited. And again, the sound design is so grounded, that the sound of the mob and the sound of the punches and how her clothes strip, you're just sitting there and you're like, ugh.
Yeah, that was draining to me. But it is cool to see such a big actress such as Jennifer Lawrence in this. She's not pretty when she comes up from this, and later on in the movie, she just gets worse and worse of her physical state. It's not very many. Usually we see people in very flattering imagery. So just a thing there. Ultimately, the poet diffuses the situation. I forget what's happening thereafter, but she's pretty much done with it, isn't she?
So after the poet diffuses the situation, he makes a case for Jennifer Lawrence to forgive the masses of people for what they've done. And she's just staring at him like, are you serious right now? Like, did you not see, like, did we live through different versions of what just happened? And yeah, that's when she's like, she kind of loses it, and she makes her way down to the basement where their old tanks are stored, and lights the house on fire.
Yep. With
herself in it. And again, one of the few wide shots that we see, it's when the house is like starting to burn, and then you see a quick mushroom cloud, which I thought was an interesting thing of putting in. Because, it talks to like...
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. It was an interesting thing to see because from what I understand, Darren Aronofsky was trying to tell the story of humanity and what other event has, scarred humanity to the point of like peace, quote unquote, because it was really like but sure, let's call it peace. Than the use of the atomic bombs, right? And I thought it was like a nice little thing to put in for his own sake and what he's trying to say. And then we see that the poet is unburned, unscarred, he's unaffected by everything that happened. He picks Jennifer Lawrence up, and we've said this before. He takes her to the bed, and she's like, "What the fuck are you?" And he says, "I am I," which I thought was like, I'm pretty sure it's a Bible thing.
Yep.
I just don't remember who God says it to, but he says it to someone. And then, he's like, she says, "I gave you everything. I have nothing left to give." He says, you have your love for me because you still love me, right? And she says, "Yes, I have that." And he looks down to her chest, and she goes, "Take it." And he reaches into it, which again, so well made. And he takes out her heart and like pressures it into a diamond, which is how the movie starts, and it kind of comes full circle.
And he places the diamond on the same pedestal where Adam and Eve crushed the original one. The house springs back to life. The house is repaired, the flame is put out, We come back to the opening shot of the bed where Jennifer Lawrence laid, but it's a different woman this time. She's unable to find her husband by her side. Bam! Oh my god! Wow! And then the credits rolled, and we actually hear the score that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Which is a fun thing, man. The impact. I love time loops, though.
I think there's so many things that we talk about when it comes to movies, but one of the ones that we really like is like this idea that the first and the last shot are important. They're important as to how it, they frame your story.
And at the first watch, I was struggling. Like the woman we see in the beginning in Flames is strikingly similar to Jennifer Lawrence, and I was kind of like very close to rewinding in order to confirm whether or not that was Jennifer Lawrence. It's not. Similar to the woman in bed is similar, but it's not Jennifer Lawrence, and I love that. Just adds to the metaphor to me that it's similar but slightly different. Ultimately, didn't work before, so might do now. I don't know. It's cool.
And I feel like you said that there's a definite sense of hope from that. Not necessarily in that we might be able to reset everything that we've done against the planet, but more like maybe we can go back to something that is, or not go back, but something like repair it to a certain point where you get something that is very similar looking to the original. You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah. You know what I'm saying, that the Flames are taking humanity with it also. So the pessimistic view on it is that it's ultimately failing again and again in an ultimate loop, and this character that is God is then, you're able to question that quite a bit.
Oh, for sure.
And their need to fix what is unfixable and already perfect without humanity in it.
But it's also this whole idea that you can never take us out of the equation, which I think Darren Aronofsky has an understanding that we will always be part of the equation, and it is up to us to change, and there is a possibility for change within us. Like you said, especially now that I know that there's people, even though there's the minority, even though they're lesser like shown, there are people who are trying to fix it. There are people who are trying to like clean up after ourselves, and I think that's where the movie ultimately succeeds for me, because it's fucked up and it's a whole intense journey, but it's not bleak and hateful and, just leaves you wanting to die. It's more of like, this is reality. We should check it. We should try and fix it, but it is up to us,
So I think we've spoken enough about the film. It is interesting, though, and you can go on for way longer. Should we wrap up our thoughts and give our ratings?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
I can go first.
Sure. So
we got acting. Phenomenal by everyone. Jennifer Lawrence has come up quite a lot, but everyone acting. Chef's kiss.
Yes.
Directing. Woo-wee. Good job, dude. Writing. Wow, the pacing works so well. The characters and the metaphors within that and the way it's weaved into. Wow, the cinematography, the lighting, it's glorious. The long takes, the technicalities of it, the works of the set and wow.
Mm-hmm.
On an objective sense, as a film, it's difficult to do a better job with a movie. Why I'm having to remove a few stars of my ratings is actually only 1 star of my rating, is because it doesn't resonate with me as a film on a personal level, I guess. Not that I would be able to say that it could achieve anything different, but I'm gonna have to give it a 4 out of 5.
I love the acting. I legitimately feel like all of these people blend into the story. Because here's the thing, right? You can't play a symbol. You have to have a character, right? Like as an actor. And they all like manage to hit a spot of like, these are characters, but they also manage to hit a spot where you're like, you have to mean something else, right? So I agree with you. Everyone was amazing. I love the technical aspects of this. The idea that she's always in frame, and the idea that it's all shot in very tight shots. It's insane to me. And it all works really well. The no score, the way that it's edited. However, I also have to take 1 star away from the movie because it works as a piece of art and it does what it's supposed to do, and it's rewatchable, and it is everything that we've said it is, and we've praised it very highly. But I can't say that it's a 5-star movie because there's things that just it doesn't connect to. Right? This is not a movie that I find myself craving to go back to. This is not a movie that, let's say, means something to me per se, which I feel is a very important aspect of the movies that we give 5 stars to, where it's like, fuck, I don't even remember the last movie that we gave 5 stars to, but going off a personal experience, movies like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where I love the performances and I love the technical aspect of it, but it also has an underlying emotional connection to me and my story. That's the last little bit that you need to cross in order to be a 5 out of 5. And this is not that, right? So it has everything else going for it, but I can't give it more than a 4 out of 5.
I agree. That's the same reasoning as of mine. It is cool how similar we are on most parts of this.
So with that, our cup of coffees are over and our conversation is over on Mother ! Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you've made it this far into the video, who hurt you? You know, I guess thanks are due for you sticking around this long. Algot, how about you do the intro for us? Intro? I mean, the outro. I'm sorry.
Well, make sure to follow us on letterboxd.com. You'll find the links in the description. Follow us there and we will log movies and review movies and do all the cool stuff that you like, similar to this entire podcast, actually. Also, speaking of the podcast, click the button that says subscribe, follow, do that stuff. Like the podcast. It makes us feel good inside and warm. And
it gives us validation that our partners can't.
Much needed.
It's different.
Not far from the poet in this movie, apparently. Nevertheless, this has been a fun, lovely time of an episode. Not creepy at all.
No, it's you should show this movie to your kids. Next Sunday, family movie watching day. You just pop it in, have a great time. Lovely.
Yeah. This is the most awkward outro we've done in a while.
Oh man. That's getting published for sure, but we've had some really shitty ones where it's like, yeah, definitely cut that out. Now I feel obligated to leave this in.
I think you are.
Alrighty. Bye.